Greetings, fellow traveller. Tired from the hardships of your journey? Here, take a seat by the fire and let me spin you a grim tale of a dark future where there is only war. Today we'll try to answer the eternal question, does the Emperor love his sons? To answer this question, we will see the events of 3 specific books, The Master of Mankind, The End and the Death Volume 2, and Dark Imperium Godblight. So yes, this video will contain spoilers of those 3 books. If you don't want to be spoiled, this is your first and only warning. To start off, we'll have a look at the events of Master of Mankind because it has to do with Ullanor, and in my opinion, Ullanor is always a juicy subject. And after that, we'll go on to discuss the events of the other 2 books. Before we start, if you're watching this video and you're not subscribed, with a single click you can help a lot to keep the channel growing and producing content. And also, if you give it a like, you can help to appease the machine spirit of the algorithm. Praise be the Omnissiah. With all that said, let's get down to the lore. During one of the mental encounters between the Emperor and Ra, on one of the few breaks he got in the war within the webway, Ra found himself on a surface that was too flat to be natural and stretched out in all directions as far as the eye could see. Undoubtedly, this was the work of the Mechanicum. Ra knew where he was. "Ullanor," said Ra. "Ullanor," answered the Emperor. "The day when nine of the Emperor's sons had gathered together with their legions and millions of soldiers of the Imperial army and the Mechanicum to witness the Emperor's departure of the Great Crusade. The day when Horus was proclaimed War Master. For the immense procession of Ullanor's triumph, the Mechanicum had flattened an entire continent, dismantling entire mountain systems, filling in valleys, and shaping the very crust of the planet for the most monumental event since the beginning of the Great Crusade. The procession was a sea of different colours among the various Astartes legions, banners, soldiers, tanks, and titans of the Mechanicum. It was simply too much to contemplate. The mind could not process such numbers. The sound of such a mass moving was thunderous. If the footsteps of a single titan were already overwhelming, those of a battle division of titans created a storm capable of shaking the very foundations of a city. The Primarchs stood apart, occupying a colossal dais erected just for them, towering over even the tallest titans. They took turns bathing in the masses' cries. Angron raised his weapons high, consecrated by the roars of the army, as he had been exalted by the masses in the arena of Nuceria. Lorgar Aurelian, herald of the Emperor, throwed his arms wide and beckoned the millions of souls to shout louder, harder. He was a demagogue, presented with a crowd that offered nothing but vindication. Sanguinius was next. The shouts that greeted him were the loudest, but the millions of men and women gathered beneath him were too far away to see how their near worship flickered uneasy in the angel's eyes. Still, as they continued to shout, Sanguinius drew his sword and saluted the masses of humanity arrayed across the plain below him. They cried their throats raw as he spread his great wings wide. A single feather flew free, descending upon the wind in slow whirls. It would become a sacred relic to the Imperial Army regiment that claimed it, with the image of a single white feather forever after emblazoned in a place of honour upon their campaign banners. One by one they came and presented themselves, until at last the Master of Mankind took his place. All of that raucous, rapturous cheering died. Every eye looked to the golden figure holding court at the centre of the dais. Those too far removed, kilometers away from the processional core, looked to erected monitors connected to drifting servo skull feeds, relaying the images. The Emperor stood before them all, armoured and armed, but never again to march with them to war. Men and women stared up at him, unaware they were weeping. Even many legionnaire faces would have shown tear trails down their gene-altered features had they not been hidden by the grills of crusade and iron-pattern helms. Horus was declared War Master. The cheers returned, victory was celebrated. Glory to the Imperium, glory to the Emperor, glory to the War Master. All proceeded as expected. No one thought the Emperor would speak again at the triumph's conclusion, and yet he had spoken once more, one last time after all. I leave not by choice, he promised them, his voice carried across the geoburn plateau, aided by the speaker drones and vox emitters liberally populating the muster. I leave not by choice. I leave only because I must. Know this, and know my regret. But know also that I return to Terra for the good of our Imperium. The Emperor turned from the crowd, moving through the pack of demigods around him. Already they were regarding their father and each other with newfound caution. One of their number had been elevated above the rest, no longer merely first among equals, but definitively named first. Like any family, their reactions and emotions at such a development would prove variable. Ra, the Emperor greeted him. The worthies around them both continued speaking, no longer paying either of them any heed at all. All of this, the custodian said. He gestured not only to the Primarchs, but the amassed pomp itself, the geoscaped continent, the sky pregnant with dropships, the gathered regimental masses weeping and cheering below. Why, sire? I never asked it then, and I have always wondered since. Why all of this? For glory, the Emperor replied, to honor the creatures that call themselves my sons, my necessary tools. They feed on glory as if it were palpable sustenance. Their own glory, of course, no different from the kings and emperors of old. It scarcely crosses their mind that glory matters nothing to me. I could have had a planet worth of glory at any time I wished it when I walked the species shadow throughout prehistory. Only 3 of them ever thought to ask why I timed my emergence as I did. Ra looked at the gathered pantheon of Primarchs. He didn't ask which 3 had questioned the Emperor. In truth, he didn't care. Such law was irrelevant. And so I gave them Ullanor, the Emperor said. They crave recognition for their honor and achievements, and the Triumph was the ultimate expression of that. In that regard, they are just as the Achaean gods and goddesses of Olympus were believed to be. Ra knew the legends: Zoas Lightning Father, Avina Warbringer, Hermio Swiftrunner, Heracles Half-God, bickering, violent divinities who were powerful enough to act with impunity over the mortals that prayed to them. Humanity's perception of god beings has never been consistent, the Emperor mused. Give any being great power and the largesse to act with impunity, and what you have is indivisible from those ancient myths. The rage of thunder gods, the battle drums of nations that prayed to war gods, the madness and decadence of powerful kings. Elements of humanity become magnified, more human than human. In that light, are the Primarchs not deities? After this exchange, the Emperor and Ra go on to talk about how the Emperor couldn't see the Horus heresy coming with his foresight. And since that's not today's topic, we'll leave it for a different video. To me, the first thing that stands out most in this excerpt is when the Emperor refers to the Primarchs as those creatures who call themselves my sons, my necessary tools, as if he himself never treated them as sons nor addressed them in such a way, or as if he never treated them in the fatherly way, and in truth the Primarchs were no more than that, necessary tools for the Emperor. In fact, Guilliman has had a similar thought in Dark Imperium Godblight, recalling that the Emperor simply allowed the Primarchs to call him father and very rarely called them sons himself. Although in the few novels where the Emperor has encounters with his sons, we do have a few examples of the Emperor clearly treating them as father to son, and being quite paternal with them indeed. We have examples of this with Vulcan, Magnus, Perturabo, Mortarion, Horus, Dawn, etc. I mean, for God's sake, he even referred to Lorgar as his son when he was forced to give him a good old spanking on Monarchia for being a naughty worshipper. And sure, one could say that this was done only to gain trust with each Primarch, to show himself close to them through an intimate facade. We all know that the Emperor does this with everyone, showing the face they want to see and telling them exactly what they want to hear in order to manipulate them and use them better. Something he could have easily done with the Primarchs too. Of course, we do know that the Emperor did not create the Primarchs out of the love of a man who wants to create a family, but out of the pure need to have generals worthy of leading his gene-forged armies to conquer the galaxy in his name. To further reinforce this idea, we have the Emperor's conversation with Guilliman when the resurrected Primarch finally arrives on Terra at the end of M41 and quote-unquote talks to the Emperor on the Golden Throne. Here we see the Emperor of Mankind very changed indeed. He seems to be in a different state of existence altogether. Guilliman does not get to see his face, nor can he look directly at him, for he is too bright. His mind seems like a confluence of several voices that often contradict each other, a raging storm that bombards Guilliman with different thoughts. Among them stand out:
My son, 13, Lord of Ultramar, Saviour, Hope, Failure, Disappointment, Liar, Thief, Betrayer, a son, not a son, a thing, a name, not a name, a number, a tool, a product, apotheosis, victory, defeat, fate, past, renewal, despair, decadence. My last loyal son, my pride, my greatest triumph, my last tool, my last hope. Guilliman.
Right, so how do we piece this all together? The easy answer is that the Emperor never loved his sons and they were always just simple tools for him. But I believe there's more to it than that, so let's carry on digging to get to the bottom of this. We know that in M41 the Emperor's mind and soul seem to be fractured and damaged, and if the Emperor really is the union of 1,000 different souls, as the shaman theory suggests, this conversation with Guilliman does represent that pretty well, showing the many different thoughts that the Emperor has and how they all strive to be the main voice. Here, in M41, there is no deception on the Emperor's part, no manipulative facade like the one he wore in life, and one could argue he's talking quote-unquote honestly, or at least he's not making an effort to deceive Guilliman. They're simply thoughts after thoughts that spew forth from the Emperor's mind one after another. We see the Emperor treating Guilliman as a tool. He literally says as much. He also calls him betrayer, liar, and thief. So on the one hand, it's pretty clear he's treating Guilliman in a cold and distant manner, like a mere object, a tool to be used in his great scheme. However, on the other hand, he also calls him his son, although he does contradict himself, and he even calls Guilliman my last loyal son, my pride, my greatest triumph. And granted, Guilliman does feel those words to be conditional, but we could say that in some manner the Emperor is proud of Guilliman and views him as a triumph, so at least there's that. Now that we're starting to see that the Emperor could indeed feel for the Primarchs, let us expand on this side of the argument. And to do that, we're going to have to dive into the spoiler of The End and the Death Volume 2. Before finally facing Horus, the Emperor is convinced to let go of the power of the Dark King, and when doing so, he also broke off a part of his own soul, amputating a portion of himself that contains almost all of his hope, loyalty, and compassion as to not pull his punches when confronting Horus. Malcador is the only one in the position to witness the Emperor's soul amputation, seeing him cast aside all his hope, mercy, grace, and love. Malcador goes on to say that as cosmic ages turn, this fragment of the Emperor's soul will slowly grow by a coalescence of emotion and belief, just as the powers of chaos grow, and views it as an infant sun or a child star. And yes, I know what you're thinking, that was a pretty big reference to the Star Child, although we're not going to go down that rabbit hole on this video, so let's get back on track. Taking this into account, if the Emperor discarded his compassion and love all those millennia ago, it's no wonder he greeted Guilliman as a mere tool in M41, since, as far as we know, the Star Child is still out there and the Emperor and the Golden Throne is incomplete. Not to mention that all the worship the Emperor has received and all the psykers he's consumed throughout the ages is turning him into a completely different entity than Guilliman knew in life. On the other hand, if the Primarchs truly are only tools to him, why did he have to amputate his own compassion, mercy, and love from his soul before facing the Primarch everyone viewed as his favourite son? Surely, if he felt no love at all for Horus, he wouldn't have to mutilate his soul in such a way, right? However, he did. And that means, at least for Horus, he did feel something. This could be the exception, since Horus was the only one to spend decades side by side with the Emperor, conquering the galaxy together and forging a unique bond with the Emperor no other Primarch would. Actually, to expand upon this, in the same paragraph of Malcador's inner monologue, he goes on to say that the Emperor had to amputate those qualities from his soul because they might stay his hand or make him hesitate if he's finally obliged to kill his son, and those qualities would, afterwards, inevitably drive him to self-hatred and regret. So yeah, in this paragraph, it's pretty clear that the Emperor did love Horus as his son and did not wish to kill him, for he would forever regret it, like any father who's forced to kill his own son. And if it's true that the Emperor did love Horus and viewed him as his son, which is made pretty clear here by Malcador, the same is more likely to be true about other Primarchs. Maybe not for all of them, looking at you, Angron, but I'd find it hard to believe he felt nothing at all for Primarchs like Sanguinius or Guilliman. On a slight side note, this last idea contradicts the old law where the Emperor faced Horus but couldn't bring himself to kill his son, and only towards the end of their duel did he excise these feelings to be able to finally slay him. I guess that means their final confrontation will be taking a new and interesting turn in the last book. And I, for one, just can't wait to see what happens in the new law. Hopefully we'll get a clearer answer about his love for his sons. Furthermore, to carry on reinforcing the argument that he did indeed view the Primarchs as his sons, and referred to them as such even without them being present, we have the conversation between the Emperor and Malcador from the book The Vengeful Spirit, where he refers to several Primarchs as his sons, when he discovers Alpharius' betrayal with the following words: "Alpharius, my son, what chance did you give my dream?" Here, the Emperor has no reason to put on a fatherly mask for his Primarchs. Malcador is his most trusted ally, the only one who knows the true depth of his plans and most of his deepest secrets, the only one he could truly call friend. The Emperor has nothing to hide from Malcador. It's also true that sometimes when talking to Malcador about the Primarchs, they have referred to them by their legion numbers, but here, in this conversation, where the Emperor has nothing to hide, he clearly calls them his sons and seems to worry about them just like a father would. Right, so we have arguments against and in favour, but what's the final verdict? First off, I'd say some of these contradictions come from different writers writing the Emperor in different ways without agreeing with each other beforehand. On the other hand, we have to again bear in mind that the Emperor is an incredibly complex being, possibly composed of 1,000 different souls that may not always see eye to eye on everything. Ultimately, trying to comprehend the feelings and thoughts of such a being is impossible. Even if he is human deep down, we can only guess what passes through his mind and his heart. So if you want my 2 cents on if the Emperor loved his sons or not, sorry to be that guy, but I believe it's more complicated than a simple yes or no answer. I think both are true to some extent. I believe there are parts of the Emperor that love his sons. I believe there are parts of him that only views them as tools to be used in his great plan. I believe there are parts of him that despise these glory-thirsty monsters he's created with the power of the warp by pure necessity, and wishes for the work to be done as soon as possible to rid the galaxy of their kind. I believe there are parts of the Emperor that are proud of what he's created and all they've achieved, and wishes to leave the wars all aside, sit down with them, and guide them like a good father would, showing them the great things they're capable of. Since, although the Emperor may have fathered biological sons, they didn't truly inherit his power. That's why the Emperor was forced to make the Primarchs, and apart from Malcador, no one else in the galaxy is closer to the Emperor than them. No one else shares a measure of his power, and could come even close to understand or feel what it's like to be him. I believe all these contradictions lie within the Emperor, and different ones rise to the surface depending on the occasion. However, if I was forced to choose one side of the argument, I guess I'd say the dominant feeling, at least after the start of the Horus Heresy, is that of a distant and cold figure, an Emperor who only views the Primarchs as his weapons and tools, dangerous things he's forged that he must now keep in line at any cost. He's seen how dangerous his creations can be, and he's weary of the powers he used to forge them. Maybe the Emperor thinks he let his guard down and got too close to the Primarchs during the Great Crusade, but after the Horus Heresy broke out, I believe he grew weary of them, for the fire he once stole from the gods is now burning his hand. Now he had to be cautious of each and every one of them, for any one of them could be a ticking time bomb. Maybe it was the betrayal of Horus that reminded him that they weren't his sons and never would be, that they were always mere weapons forged by his own hands, and now they were turning against him. All in all, maybe the Emperor at some point did feel something like fatherly love for some of his Primarchs. Maybe not for all of them, but it's clear he had his favourites who he loved, even if it were in a distant and cautious way. But after the heresy began, the Emperor had to rid himself of the love he had for them, however small or great it were, discard his mercy, and arm himself with distrust to face them. For now, the gods had corrupted them, and even those who seemed loyal could be in the thrall of his greatest enemy. Well, there you have it. I know I haven't given a straight answer, but that's my honest opinion. And yes, I know the End and the Death Volume 3 is right around the corner, and we might get a clearer answer there. So if we do, I'll have to do an update video after this one. I also know a lot of you will have your own opinions and thoughts about this very controversial topic, so please go ahead and post them below. I look forward to reading them. Anyway, that's all from me for now. If you liked the video, you know the drill. Like and subscribe for more content and leave a comment below. Thanks for watching, and hopefully we'll meet again in the next video.